European honeybees, they were brought over here to pollinate our crops. Why are they needed? They're needed because in our farmlands, due to the way agriculture has been, you know, been managed for the past many decades, we've killed off our native bee species in all of these monoculture, huge agricultural areas. So we need to bring in these hives of European honeybees. And so honeybee farmers will travel around to from farm to farm with their hives, let the bees go, pollinate the crops, the bees come back to the hive, and the farmer moves on to the next farm. This is kind of an unnatural way to have to pollinate our crops, but that's where we are, and that's what we've done. And it is pretty precarious. I'm sure that in recent years you've heard of things like colony collapse disorder and the need to save our honeybees because they were dying out and we rely on them for our food chain. Really kind of a precarious situation. And what we need to do is try to bring back, is not be relying solely on that, and trying to bring back some of our native bees to the landscape so that we're not so reliant on this bee farming method that when it goes awry, we are not in a good place. And if you ever hear about like aggressive bees, I mean, usually honeybees, they're not going to bother you when they're foraging, but because they are very large colonies, they can be more aggressive and they can sting, and they compete with our native bees for food. So our native bees are declining in numbers, and many are on the road to extinction. And actually, honeybees are making the problem worse for our native bees. So it's not that we need the honeybees because we've decimated our native bee population so much. We need our honeybees for our food sources, but our cities, our suburbs, they can be wonderful areas to try to keep our native bees thriving. And we're hoping, and it is starting to happen, that farmers will start to incorporate some native plants and to start trying to bring back some native bees to our farmlands, so we're not as reliant on the honeybees. Now to our native bees. Almost all native bees are solitary. The only real exception is our bumblebees. Native bees are primarily peaceful and they rarely sting. Many don't even have stingers. People get afraid of planting plants in their yard that's going to attract bees. First of all, most of our native bees are not going to sting, period. And probably many don't even have a stinger. If the ones that do, like, for example, a bumblebee, they're not going to sting you while they're foraging. The only time that they might sting you is when you're near the nest, and you might be near the nest and not realize it. That perhaps, or if you step on one in the grass. But by and large, the majority of quote unquote bee stings are actually yellow jacket wasps. So we really try to help people understand and fear bees less, because they really are not threatening, and they really and we need them. We just can't let their numbers continue to decline the way they have. It's really not an option. The other thing, our native bees are much better pollinators, much more efficient pollinators than the European honeybees that we rely so heavily on. In fact, one type of native bee, a mason bee, which has no stinger, is the most efficient pollinator. One mason bee can do the pollination of 250 honeybees. And this is a mason bee on my finger. Again, they do not sting. They're completely peaceful. They're solitary. They nest in cavities, and they're wonderful early season native bees that are out in April, May, and June, pollinating a lot of our early crops, fruit trees. They're very important for the production of fruit on fruit trees. And again, completely harmless, as most of our native bees are. And here's some of the foods that we can thank bees for pollinating for us. Okay, and another kind of pollinator I want to talk about, and I really want to talk about insects in general. Um, Butterflies, moths, they are pollinators. However, the ecosystem service that they provide, they're not near as efficient of pollinators as our bees. The bees are the big ones when it comes to pollination. However, butterflies and moths are actually the foundation of our food chain. Their caterpillars take nutrients from green plants and it goes up the food chain through animals. So they're the ones that take the energy from sunlight in green plants and get it in moving up the food chain. Um, the monarch butterfly has become kind of the poster child of what's wrong with what's going on with our insects now. The monarch butterfly, her caterpillar, her offspring, this is the young, they can only feed on one type of plant, and that is milkweed. Without milkweed, this adult butterfly cannot lay eggs, cannot reproduce. She needs milkweed to lay her eggs on. Milkweed was a common prairie plant. It used to be common in roadsides. As we've done more urban urban sprawl, more residential, more businesses, taking out a lot of our open areas. And as our farms have gotten bigger and less prairie and meadows, we have decimated our milkweed. And because of that, we've decimated the population of the monarch butterfly. And Illinois, I mean, numbers last year, I want to say that our population of monarch butterflies has decreased. I believe it was 96% as of last year in the last 3 decades. They are on the road to extinction. There is a big effort to try to plant more milkweed to try to prevent these guys from going extinct. And Illinois is a very important state in attempting to do this because their migratory route runs right through Illinois. But they're just basically a poster child of what's going on throughout the insect world. Many insects, beneficial insects, require a certain type of native plant with which they co-evolved over centuries in order to reproduce. They can feed, they can eat nectar and pollen from non-native plants, but they cannot reproduce without native plants. Insects need native plants to breed and feed, and our food chain depends on insects. However, the world's insect population is plummeting. It's estimated that it has declined almost 30% in 3 decades. Many people call this, a lot of people refer to this as the insect apocalypse. These are just some photos to remind those of you like me who are old enough to remember times like this where lightning bugs were in abundance. Caterpillars, you would see a caterpillar walking across the sidewalk. When do you ever see that? When we get into the summer, take a look up at street lights and see if you see the moths fluttering around the street lights. You don't. Their numbers are so decreased that you'll be lucky if you see one or two. Drive at night. I remember back when I was a kid or in my 20s, I would be driving at night and your windshield would be splattered with bugs. Now you can go driving at night and you don't have a problem because there just isn't as many insects anymore. It used to be a common occurrence to see ladybugs. Now it's a treat. Even little guys like this guy, I don't know if you remember, we used to call them doodle bugs or roly-poly bugs. I don't remember. I think their technical name is a pill bug, actually. And their numbers, believe it or not, are greatly decreasing. And they're extremely important, along with other types of beetles, in breaking down organic matter. They're kind of like the scavengers. They get rid of our garbage. They break down organic matter. They prevent disease by doing this. They clean things up, and they make our soil more nutrient rich. So what is causing this insect apocalypse? One of the main things is lawn chemicals and pesticide use. Habitat loss, obviously, housing, businesses, agriculture, all the natural lands, and especially housing doesn't have to be, but for example, this house would be because all it has is lawn, and lawn does not have any ecosystem value to our native insects. And introduced invasive plant species. And I show a picture of a pear tree here, and Peggy will be talking a lot more about that in a upcoming slide. Okay, Dr. Jonas Salk once said, if all insects on Earth disappeared within 50 years, all life on Earth would end. If all human beings disappeared from Earth within 50 years, all forms of life would flourish. So the way their numbers have declined over recent decades, we really can't keep going in this direction. It will be catastrophic if we don't turn this around. So I guess, for lack of better words, we got to start liking and appreciating our insects more. Then another critter I want to talk about is birds. Now, they're not quite as hard of a sell as trying to get people to soften their hearts on to insects and bees. People tend to like birds. Birds are, fluffy and sweet, and they make a pretty sound, and they're just, easy to like. We often, because of that, we forget how important they are. Birds provide essential ecosystem service that we basically could not survive, that we couldn't survive without them. They keep destructive agricultural insects in check. They too are responsible for the pollination of some plants. They are greatly responsible for preventing disease through waste removal. They spread seeds that restore ecosystems, and they help to store carbon and keep the climate stable by sustaining natural landscapes. They are nature's farmers. They're the ones that are out there kind of keeping it rolling, and even when you think of things like the rainforest, it's birds that are keeping that thing rolling, that is affecting our weather. So we can't get by without the services of birds. Unfortunately, their numbers are plummeting as well. And we need birds, birds need insects, and insects need native plants. Why are birds declining, and why do birds need insects? A lot of birds eat seed, berries, but even birds that eat seeds and berries, they need insects to feed their young. There's only one or two types of birds that don't feed insect to their young. By and large, birds entirely feed insect to their young. And the favorite insect and the most critical insect that they need to feed their young is butterfly and moth caterpillars. They are the most nutritious, and they are the most important food source for nesting birds. According to Doug Tallamy, it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise one clutch of young chickadees. That is a tremendous amount of caterpillars. And when you remember that our native species, our butterflies and moths, can only lay their young, and caterpillars can only feed on native plants. If you take those native plants out of the equation, and there's not going to be caterpillars, and there's not going to be anything to feed young birds. Because of that, I think the statistics are 3 billion birds we've lost in the last 30 years in the United States. So here's an example of how native plants are the foundation of our food chain. Down here we have native plants. The birds need the native plants. The insects need the native plants. The birds need the insects. The crops need the insects for pollination. Our livestock needs the crops. We need the livestock. We need the crops. And then over here on this side, our herbivores need native plants. Our herbivores need birds to plant our wild areas and our nature areas. And our carnivores need birds and the herbivores. So it all comes back down to native plants being the base of our food chain. So this sounds kind of depressing. Yes, our birds are disappearing at amazingly troubling numbers very quickly, as are our insects and our pollinators. And this is not an option. We can't continue on this road. But it all is not hopeless. There is a lot that we can do. So I am going to turn it over, because you're probably so sick of listening to my voice. I am going to turn it over to Peggy Connor now, who's going to be talking about, all right, we got this problem, but what can we do about it? Peggy?
Thank you, Kathy. I have the best part of the presentation, because it's Kathy talked about the problems and the areas we need to work on, and I'm going to talk about the possibility, what we can do. So next slide, please. Kathy's going to run the slideshow, because we can have only one PowerPoint presentation going along. So number one, what can we do about this? Number one, we plant native. Not only are our native plants beautiful, as you can see by these slides, they are, as Kathy described, they're essential to our ecosystem. They're very easy to care for, because they've already adapted to our climate and our soil, and they require less water, which is becoming a very expensive element in the Chicagoland area, is water. So these are some of the common native plants that we have. You can see things that you recognize right off the bat, like the purple coneflower in the middle there, sunflowers, the black-eyed Susans, and the orange flower down there is a butterfly weed, which is the milkweed, which is what, excuse me, the monarch butterflies breed and feed on. So this is just a small portion of the native plants available. Next slide, please, Kathy. So there's tons of native plants, and what we encourage you to do is, there's so many sources to find out the local native plants, but one great source is the National Wildlife Federation, and they have a native plant finder, and you can see that is nwf.org/native plant finder, and that should be, I think they're going to put this link into the it's someplace on
The chat. Yeah, we'll put that link in the chat.
Yes, thanks, Kathy. So all you do is put your zip code in, and then press Find Native Plants, and you'll find a listing of native plants that are just so adaptable to our area here. Next slide, please. Okay, what is a keystone plant? Every garden should include keystone plants. A keystone plant is and every ecosystem has certain species that are critical to the survival of other species in the system. Without them, the ecosystem may not survive. So they're critically important plants. Next slide, Kathy. This is basically a pretty good list of the keystone plant species in our areas. And the first one I just want to mention is the oak, the mighty oak. There's 20 native species in Illinois, and it is just an incredible tree. 456 species live in oak trees. It's just by far the most beneficial tree out there. But there's other trees that are useful, and that's the plum cherry tree, the willow, not the weeping willow, that's from China, and it gets incredibly large, but there is a native willow. The birch tree, red maples. Some of the plants that are keystone is the goldenrod, sunflowers, the wild strawberry plant, false indigo or lead plant, and Joe Pye. So those are our major keystone plants. But what we wanted to do was talk about, not only people have yards, and we want you to, plant pollinator gardens in your yards, but if you don't have land and you have a balcony or a patio, you can still help the pollinators by planting in your containers, which is really cool. I never knew about it. For years, I've never had a native plant in my containers. They've all been geraniums, pretty much. But you want to incorporate 3 types of plants in your containers, and that's the thriller, a spiller, and a filler. And the thrillers are really the focal point or the center point of your container, and some really useful plants in that category are blue hyssop, oxeye sunflower, aniscented goldenrod, zigzag goldenrod, or obedience plant. And then you have the spillers, which are the cascading plants that go over the sides of your container. Two useful plants for that are Purpy mallow and wild strawberry plant. And then if you have a big enough container, you want to fill in some of that space. And that's mid-sized mounding plants, which are the purple coneflower, the butterfly weed, which we just talked about as milkweed, landsleaf coreopsis, foxglove, wild petunia, sky blue aster, and prairie dropseed. And they will, you will see your containers become alive again because the pollinators will visit these containers. And they never visited any of my other containers loaded with geraniums. But not only are native plants important to pollinators, especially for pollen, but pollinators need a lot of nectar. And there are some beneficial non-native annuals that will offer up a lot of nectar for our pollinators. And those include lantana, cosmos, zinnia, and lysum. I always can never pronounce that name, but I hope I did it did it worthwhile. So those are, as we said, you can have an acre of land in your backyard filled with native plants. You can have a 6-foot piece placed in your yard. You can have containers. But what we really want to do is create a pollinator-friendly habitat in our environment. Next slide, please, Kathy. So the first thing to do, and this is going to hurt some people's hearts, is to remove your invasive plant species. An invasive species is an introduced plant from another part of the world, as Kathy mentioned, mostly China and Europe. Because it is not evolved here and has no natural checks and balances, it takes over our natural lands and snuffs out our native species. Next slide, Kathy. All right, here we go. The most highly invasive tree plant in our area and probably throughout the United States is the Calorie pear, the Bradford pear, once planted in everyone's landscaping. And landscapers loved it because it was a beautiful tree in spring with white flowers, and it was a fast-growing tree. However, it is a weedy invader in our natural lands, especially in the forest preserves, because the seeds are carried by birds. Now, I'd like you to pay attention in the forest preserves from now on and in grasslands, and you will see in spring all these white flowering trees. They are not native plants. That is the Calorie Bradford pear that is invading our forest preserves. It's a real problem in Cook County Forest Preserves, and they are desperately trying to get rid of this. It's also probably in many grasslands and prairies too, because the seeds so easily spread. We know that in Orland Park, the big grasslands out here, it's loaded with Calorie pears because there are home developments around these grasslands and forest preserves, and the birds carry the seeds from the home landscaping into the natural areas. So the Calorie pear also leaves out before native species in the spring, and so it prevents native plants from growing underneath them. So we're eliminating a whole bunch of native species, ground cover, because they cannot, the Calorie pear leaves out before, or in early spring rather. It's a host to absolutely zero caterpillars. It provides no value whatsoever to our native pollinators and birds. You would think it would with all those flowers, but no pollinators or birds flock to those trees. You'll see them. They're very dead trees. Calorie pear ranks second only to habitat destruction as a threat to biodiversity. It's a very soft wood. It's easily damaged. It has an offensive odor when it's in bloom. I don't think we pay attention to it because it blooms such an early spring. We're not out there walking around, but it's easily damaged by the wind. I'm guilty of this. I had a Calorie Bradford pear in my front yard, and one day I looked over and I saw some heavy plants on my front porch. I thought, oh, somebody gave me a lovely plant. No, it was my Calorie pear toppled over in the wind. And this is becoming more prevalent. Some states are actually beginning to ban the sales of these trees. They are so invasive and so detrimental to our natural lands.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, off the next slide, there are beautiful substitutes for the Calorie pear. Two great alternatives are the serviceberry, which again has it's beautiful white flowers, and also the flowering dogwood. So if you're so inclined to remove your Calorie pears, you can substitute these two beautiful trees for the same benefits that you probably like your Calorie pear, which is the white flowers in the spring. Next slide. Okay, another thing that's probably going to hurt people's hearts is a highly invasive plant in our area is the burning bush. And many people have these on our property because everyone and landscapers like this when they first came in and told us what to put in, or they did the landscaping themselves, because it has a beautiful, beautiful red fall foliage. However, they are very aggressive. Their seedlings spread prolifically. In natural lands, they form dense thickets. It's the top cash crop for the $16 billion ornamental plant industry. Remember, most ornamentals have no value to our ecosystem. They're listed as an invasive species in 21 states. That's huge, and probably growing as we speak. And they offer minimal wildlife benefit, except if you want deer on your property, deer like burning bush. You'll find that most of our native plants are resistant to deer. So unless you want deer coming up and chewing up your plants, plant native. So go to the next slide. So some great native alternatives which have that same beautiful color are the chokeberry and the arrowwood viburnum. Next slide. So this is kind of a couple of slides just to go over how to really improve our habitat. And again, choose native plants that provide pollen and or nectar, include some butterfly and moth host plants, minimize hybrid or native cultivars. Now, a lot of the nurseries and big box stores are talking about having some native plants. But if you look at those labels closely, you'll see them a cute name in apostrophes. For example, pretty peony purple or something like that with a single apostrophe on each end. That is a cultivar. They have been bred for one single attribute, and usually the number of flowers, but they're really not very useful to our pollinators and wildlife. Planting clusters rather than single specimens, it just is more impactful. Okay, the big thing, again, well, Kathy gave the bad news, but I'm giving some bad news too. Reduce the size of your lawn. Lawns provide absolutely no value, but we're not going to get rid of all our lawns. Kathy and I have lawn, but we're slowly reducing the size of our lawn because you still have to have children and pets, and people like to walk on their lawn a little bit, but we don't need these massive amounts of lawns because they provide no value to our ecosystem. They take a lot of fertilizer and an immense amount of water. Choose a variety of spring, summer, and fall blooming plants so you can provide pollinator food throughout all of the seasons. And then in the winter, you'll have some winter interest as well.
Whoops.
Okay, then we have to go back to avoid the use of pesticides and herbicides. I have to admit I was a mass murderer. I had mosquitoes in my yard, and I'm still asking for forgiveness about that. So we don't want mosquitoes, but there's some natural ways to get rid of mosquitoes besides pesticides and herbicides. And I'm going to share one real quick with you. Doug Tallamy, who we're going to have the webinar next week, he is the absolute king of the ecosystems in the United States. He had this great suggestion. You get, one of your everyday plastic buckets or 5-gallon drums, plastic drum, you fill it with some straw, you fill that with water, and you get one of those dunkers, mosquito dunkers that you can buy at Ace Hardware or Home Depot or Lowe's, and you drop that in there. Your mosquitoes will be attracted to that site. They'll go in there to breed, and they'll The dunker will, and it's all natural substances, not toxic. The dunkers will kill the beginning breeds, the whatever that's
The
called.
larva.
The larva. Thank you, Kathy. I do lose my words sometimes. Sorry. When possible, use native plant ground covers to prevent weeds. There's some really beautiful ones like wild ginger, etc. Let fallen leaves remain in your garden beds until spring. Many pollinators overwinter in leaf litter. For example, the lightning bugs, that's where they overwinter, is in our leaf litter. And there's a great thing that's more and more landscape operations are getting, which is called leaf mulch. And we've just recently put that in our beds, and it's a wonderful, wonderful mulch instead of the hard mulches. And then you can just rake your leaves or gently blow your leaves, not blow them crazy, into your beds over winter, and that will decompose and add really wonderful nutrients to your soil. A real simple thing that many of the suburbs are trying to engage in this, and basically just wait until after Mother's Day for your first lawnmower mow to help spring foraging pollinators and emerging insects. Wait until spring to do a yard cleanup. We don't have to do it in fall, not so much anymore, because it really disrupts our overwintering insects. And that was sort of really sort of a dread thing. Okay, we know we have to spring clean up, but we better do that in fall too. But many pollinators overwinter in those old stems. And a very easy thing to do to create more beneficial habitat is help reduce light pollution that harms our birds and insects. They migrate through the night sky and through the stars, and they get very disorientated and often bash into high rises, etc. But they bash into windows too, just in our normal homes when they get disoriented by our lights. So use motion sensors, yellow or soft white LED lights outdoors that shine downward. And they'll also keep your light fixtures very clean because the moths won't bang themselves and kill themselves against your light fixtures. So one of our goals is to create a pollinator corridor. And then that is basically a pathway that will offer contiguous habitat and forage to our vulnerable native species. Remember, they are declining rapidly, and we need to do something to stop that. So what we can do is connect large habitats such as parks and meadows with small habitats such as our home gardens and yards and roadside flower beds. Every plant counts. If you put 3 plants in this summer, I will high five you. That is awesome. We just want to get more people planting more plants. Any size garden can become a vital way station in our pollinator corridor. And corridors allow pollinators to migrate to other climates like the monarch butterfly or avoid threats like pesticides. So if your neighbors are using pesticides, they're going to all flock to your yard because you're just going to have this pure habitat in your yard now. Next slide. So the most frequent question we get everywhere we go is, where do we find native plants? And they're somewhat difficult to find. Most nurseries and big box stores don't carry native plants. So you have to go online. You can Google native plants. There's many mail order nurseries that offer native plants that you'll get through Googling. And an important key element is local plant sales, which are often offered by forest preserves or other organizations like ours. And SAG Moraine is really proud to announce is our first spring plant sale. And that will be June 4th in 2022. We're so happy to partner with Moraine Valley Community College. They're letting us use some of their facilities from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And there are plant packages available on our website. Now, those are they are totally complete with beautiful, beautiful designs created by Jeremy Ohms of Wild World Gardens. And they include all the plants needed to plant and I'll show you the gardens in a minute, but to plant your gardens. And there's 4 different packages that we're going to offer. So go to sagmoraine.org and you can just follow the instructions to find our plant sales. So you can pre-order them, but only until March 1st. We have to have our orders into the wholesalers by then. But on June 4th at Moraine Valley, we're going to be having at least hundreds to maybe 1,000 individual plants available for sale. So come on out there too and find some individual plants that you can plant in your gardens. So this is an example of one of the designs on our website, and it's a full sun foundation garden. We also have a rain garden. We have a full sun pollinator garden, and also a partial shade pollinator garden. And this is what it looks like. And you can see that it's really filled with beautiful, beautiful plants. That's the intention. The fuller your planting area is, the less you're going to have to weed. And they love to just feed off of each other. They lean on each other. You have just seasonal beauty and color. And just some of these are the blue false indigo, the switchgrass, butterfly weed again, black-eyed Susan, and that's just one example. But there's a total of 4 gardens on our website that you can pre-order, and they range from I believe it's about 75 plants to 100, about 100 plants. So go on there.
No, they range from 18 plants, I think
Oh, I'm sorry.
17 plants, and I think the biggest
Sorry.
one, this one is 23.
Yes, I'm sorry, not 107.
I was like, oh my God,
No,
I don't want to do that much planting.
No. I see again, my brain. Okay, forgive me. Everybody understand that 70, what is it, Kathy? 17 plants.
The smallest one is 16 plants, and the biggest one is this one with 23. And our goal is really to try to make, when people say they want to start planting native, they also don't necessarily feel like they want to, devote their entire life to learning about native plants. What ones do I choose? Where do I put them? We want to try to make it easy for people to get involved with planting native and have the design, so you have the plants and you know exactly where to place them. Make it as easy as possible.
Right. It's for the beginner as well as the experienced gardener. So they're really wonderful designs. So one of the most important things that we're trying to promote a little bit of is get on the map. You can have a container in your yard or a 40 square foot garden. But join Doug Tallamy again, Dr. Douglas Tallamy's grassroots call to action. And basically start a new habitat in your yard or garden or container by planting native plants and removing invasive species. The goal is to add 20 million acres of native plantings in the U.S. There is no big space left that the government or big lands are going to be able to plant these 20 million acres of native plants. But if each individual does a few plants, we will have 20 million acres of native plants. It's the largest cooperative conservation project ever conceived or attempted. The website's on the chat room, but every plant counts. So if you have 3 by 3 foot container, or you can put your name on the map, and it's kind of cool. You can be on this magnificent map and contribute overall to saving our habitats and increasing our pollinators. So it's at homegrownnationalpark.org. And again, remember to check in, and if you have time next Thursday to go to our website. Can you go back, Kath? Thanks. At sagmoraine.org, and you can sign up for Dr. Tallamy's webinar, which is free to all subscribers. So restore our environment one plant at a time. Support Sag Moraine. It's your local environmental ecosystem. Rah, rah, hoopla, yay, yay. You can do that by becoming a member, donating, or becoming a volunteer. So visit us at our website, or we're on Facebook and Instagram as well. So I just want to thank you for your attention and time, and thank Oaklawn Library for inviting us and having us. But now we'd like to take questions if anybody has some. So please
there were a few
let us know.
Chat. I don't know if you can see it or not. If not, I can read. Okay.
No,
So Kathy Durkin had a few questions. Well, the first one was, has your organization worked with a group working to save Bell Bull Prairie, where an endangered rusty patched bumblebee lives. It's the original.
Isn't that whole thing very, please, have we worked with them? I mean, yeah, we're trying to support them by getting them to spread the word out. Take a look at our Facebook page. We're very active on social media trying to get the word out about this stuff. And yeah, we've written a number of articles and encouraging our followers to contact their government officials about this. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is a great question. There's a remnant prairie that is up. It's actually on land owned by the Rockford Airport, and the Rockford Airport wants to build more runways so that we can have more Amazon cargo planes coming in. And they're going to destroy this remnant prairie that is, I mean, it's very unique. I mean, it's never been touched. There's some very rare plants on this prairie, and it's been protected all of these years, and they want to start bulldozing it in March. And it's been through the courts. It's a legal battle, and it's not looking real good, in my opinion. And it's so disheartening because I don't know if any of you have heard of the rusty patch bumblebee. This is a bumblebee species of ours, and in Illinois, parts of Illinois are one of the last few places in the country where it exists. And it has, as recently as last fall, it was seen foraging in Bell Bull Prairie. So it could be nesting below the ground there. The thing that makes it so disheartening is there are many ways that have been mapped out of how this airport can be expanded without destroying the prairie. But so far, they've been hard-headed, and like I said, it's a battle that's still going on. And if we've written a lot about it on our Facebook, so look into that, yes, and contact your lawmakers to give them your opinion about destroying Bell Bull Prairie. Does that answer your question? It's kind of depressing. I wish I had good news, like, oh, it's safe.
Okay, thank you for the response. I did have a couple more
Okay.
questions here from the chat. Will you talk about native plants versus cultivators slash nativers?
Nativars?
Yeah, nativars. I found that native plants are not available to purchase in big box stores like Home Depot or even most gardening stores. What can we do to request such stores carry native plants?
And that is like that is so key, and that is so frustrating. That's why we rely so heavily right now on local native plant sales like the one that we're having. But even though we love having the plant sale, and it would be a dream come true to have some of the big box stores to start carrying native plants. I mean, it would be a dream come true if people could go, because once the native plant sales are over, and they're pretty much over by the local native plant sale by the middle of June, they're pretty much over. If you want to plant a native plant the end of June, early July, you can't find them. You can't find them anywhere. Every place online is sold out, and there's no plant sales around. What a dream it would be if there was a native plant supplier that was open to the public, not for wholesale, but to the public, to be able to walk in anytime during the growing season and buy a native plant. Or if some of our big box stores could get involved. And I don't even know that I expect the big box stores to get involved so much, but some of the privately owned nurseries and the bigger nurseries, whether it be Allsip Nursery or, all the big ones around, if they could start carrying more of the straight species, that would be just amazing. And our view is that they're going to sell whatever they can sell, whatever they can make money on, they're going to sell, and they're going to carry. And the more people demand them, the more likely they will start selling them. So what I've started doing, and I recommend people to do, is if you are in a garden center and you are buying your lantana or your cosmos for your pots, for the pollinators. Even though you know they don't have it, go up to somebody in the store and say, and think of a name of a native plant. Say, do you carry straight species purple coneflower, or do you carry blue hyssop, or New Jersey tea, and come up with a couple names of a native plant. And when they say no, just say, oh, you really should. It's a native plant. It's wonderful for our ecosystem, and it's absolutely beautiful. And my hope is that maybe if people just start asking, they will start caring. And again, it's always like it's just behind. I mean, we're trying to raise awareness so that that's what people want, and that's what people start demanding. And once more and more people start demanding it, they'll start carrying it. They're going to carry what people want, but we got to get the word out more so that people are demanding it. So it is true right now. It's problematic. It's not real easy to get native plants, especially, you can get them in the spring and everybody tries to go get them and they sell out. And then you're just kind of lost. It's kind of disheartening. And we run into that when we're going around giving talks like this. We're excited to do it at this time of year. We have a lot of presentations come in February and March and even into April. And we're very excited about it because we can tell people about our plant sales. So we can tell them, please, oh, please plant native, help our ecosystem, help our pollinators. And guess what? We have a place where you can get native plants. But when we start doing these presentations, once June 15th rolls around, and for the rest of the year when we're doing presentations, we're telling people, please plant native. And then it's like, well, but you may not be able to find them. So that is an unfortunate problem. And I would say that the best thing that we can do is just take the time to go in and ask for them. Even though we know they don't have them, ask for them. And if people keep asking for them, they'll start to bring them on.
Kathy, Mark made a suggestion. He uses Prairie Moon, and that is a great nursery.
That is a great nursery.
Prairie Moon Nursery, you can find that online.
Yes, Prairie Moon. So I know some people don't like to mail order plants because they're afraid that they're going to ship and they're going to, not be alive. But most of the time, I've only had a problem, I think, once with plants that were too long in shipping, and they were very good about it. But Prairie Moon Nursery, they're in Minnesota, and their plants are lovely. So I would order from there. And there is Prairie Nursery, which is in Wisconsin. And that's another wonderful place that you can order plants and have them shipped to you. The problem with we do have local native plant nurseries, but they're all wholesalers. And what that means is, for example, where we're getting our plants for our packages for our plant sale is a place called Possibility Place. And that's in Moraine. It's huge, and it's all native plants. The problem is they only sell things in bulk. So you need to be buying at least a flat of 18, which makes it not really conducive for the average homeowner that maybe wants to buy, 2 or 3 of this and 2 or 3 of that and one of those. And there's another place like that up on the north side. I think it's in Algonquin, called Natural Communities, but it's the same thing. It's a wholesaler. So that's why you have the organizations like us that are the middleman. We take orders, and then we place a large order from the wholesaler so that we can get them. But that's an excellent suggestion. Prairie Moon and Prairie Nursery are 2 good online sources where you can get native plants. But I would order them early. Even they start to sell out. So, the time to order native, people think of buying their plants like in May around here. For the most part, we got to order our native plants by March, or even places like Prairie Moon or Prairie Nursery might be out of what you want. So order early.
She just answered it. Okay. It's best to order by March.
Okay.
And that way they could ship it to us. And if I don't get it, miss something, I come there on the floor.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. That was a question from our patron here, but you kind of answered it already. So
Oh, okay.
was about getting the plants early, or if you don't get them early, but as you said, that is the best way to do it. And then just one more, looking back at the chat to kind of go along with what we were saying. Any specific ideas on how to spread the word to our local school and park districts and get them on board with native plants?
Well, that is a great question. Now, what we are doing, and we are always looking for help to do this, because the more worker bees we have, the more we can do. We reach out to community through, and hopefully there will be more events this year, like fests. We go to farmers markets. We're trying to spread the word that way. We're going to libraries, park districts. We're giving our talk, and then we let the professionals like Doug Tallamy do some of our bigger webinars, like next week, that we offer to all of the, anybody anywhere actually. And so what can we do? I mean, we're pushy. We try to reach out to municipalities. We're trying to get municipalities on board and doing more to promote native plants. And we're so thankful to libraries like Oak Lawn, because if people see that a library is saying this is important enough for us to invite somebody in to talk about, that's actually giving it, credibility. Yes, native plants are something we really need to consider and think about, and maybe start adding some to our landscapes. And we're reaching out to, some towns have environmental commissions, and we've reached out to some environmental commissions. In fact, this spring we're going to be putting in a large partnering with Tinley Park to put a large pollinator garden in there over by the train station in a very public area with a sign. So we're trying to because we want people to see native plants. We want them, and not just any native plants, because here's the other thing, and I do want to mention this. One of the reasons why native plants have gotten a bad name over the years is because people think of prairies, and prairies are beautiful as a prairie. But most people don't want prairies in their front yard. And most neighbors don't want prairies in their front yard. And we don't want people complaining about us. And we don't, and it doesn't have to be a prairie. But there's many native plants that are very conducive to smaller suburban landscapes. So what we try to do is suggest and recommend plants that aren't going to get 10 feet tall, plants that aren't going to spread all over or seed themselves all over, plants that are going to be beautiful, support our ecosystem, and but also inspire other people around us to plant them. If somebody walks by your beautiful pollinator garden out in front, your little, 4x4 or 5, and say, how beautiful it is, and you say that's all native plants, then they might say, oh, maybe I'll add some native plants to my landscaping. But if you have your whole front yard, a prairie with 10-foot tall plants in it, they'll probably just complain to the town, And so we really want to guide people not just on planting native, but what are good plants to plant that are going to work well and also help inspire our neighbors to do the same thing.
Kathy, let me add a couple of things to
Sure.
that question. If we're always looking for opportunities.
Yes.
So you can contact us at sagmoraine.org if you know of a school or a school district or any organization, garden club, any organization that would be willing to listen to our presentation. We're absolutely willing to give them. And the second thing is that we also just finished working on a presentation and that exact mode that you're talking about, Kathy, and for how to select plants for a traditional suburban landscape. So it would blend in with what you have, because you're not going to rip out everything, and what would go along well. So we do have two presentations. This is talking about the problem and some solutions, and then we're specifically looking at landscaping opportunities in our second one. So just let us know, and we'd be happy to do that. If anybody knows a superintendent or somebody that has, can have some influence, please reach out to them and reach out to us, and we're happy to connect.
Yeah, we'll speak anywhere that they'll let us, and anywhere where there's an audience that will listen to us. And we want our ultimate goal is to get community gardens planted in every suburb in the southwest suburbs to display the importance of native plants and how truly beautiful they can be, and try to inspire all home and business owners to start incorporating them. So yes, any way that you can help, any leads that you have, please share them.
Peggy and Catherine, I just joined tonight, so we should probably talk, because I've got some, I can give you some more information on what I'm doing working with the village here on this restoration and the Chicago Ridgeberry. And I've got a wealth of experience and interest. I've got a little prairie myself and rain garden in my property and all kinds of things. So
Yes, I want to connect with you. When?
yeah, well, I joined. You guys got my email in the thing.
We'll,
So
we'll
you're
contact
followed
you,
now,
Mark. We'll contact you and give you our phone numbers and that. So if you want a personal
Yep.
discussion,
Yeah, so
we'd be happy to.
yeah, we'll send you an email. We'll look up
because I've made
when
some
we're done
inroads.
tonight, we'll look up your email address, send you an email, and try to set up a time where we can have a phone conversation.
Sounds
Great.
good. Okay. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining, and thank you for helping us. We got to get this word out. It's bad news, yes. I mean, when you look at the way the numbers of our pollinators have declined and our birds, and anybody who has kids and grandkids, I mean, this isn't an option to keep going down this road, but it is good news because there is still there is hope, and it's actually quite amazing what a difference we can make in our own yard. And I could go on forever, but I could start telling you stories about what has happened in my own yard since I started adding native plants. And it's just come alive with diversity and bees and the butterflies. And it's almost shocking because you don't see that anywhere. I mean, I talk to people all the time who say, "Oh, I never see butterflies anymore." Well, last year I was able to say, "Really? I had a ton in my yard." Oh, I had a ton in my yard because I have native plants, but I'm also the only one, I think, in the town that has native plants. So I think every butterfly is in my yard, but if you plant it, they do come. And we have tremendous, every landowner that has the tiniest piece of land has the ability to make a difference. And I what we try to do is spread a message of hope as well, that we can help this problem.
One yard at a time.
One yard at a
One yard at a time.
Okay, I gotta go, so I'll look forward to speaking with you.
Thank
Great.
you very much. You'll be hearing from us.
Okay, doke.
Okay, and I'm sorry. Kathy Durkin also asked if these resources will be posted on your website or on the library. I've actually been recording this presentation too, so it might take a day or two, but I'm going to make sure our PR person puts it on our YouTube page.
Perfect.
So, if you want to look for it there, that's probably the easiest way. Then, you can watch and, just kind of fast forward, rewind, and find exactly what you want to look for. So long answer, yes, it will be available. So that way you can come back and view this. And I'm hoping other people will see it as well, so we can spread the word as much as possible.
And you know what? If you have any specific questions about anything that was in this presentation or anything else having to do with native plants, we want to be a community resource for native plants. So if we don't know the answer, we will find out the answer. So send us a message, go on our website, go on the contact page and send us a message. And we look at our messages every day. So we'll get back to you with any questions you have, or any questions or input or help you want moving forward to get to try to get more native plants on your property. And I can't stress enough to try, if you're available, sign up for our Doug Tallamy webinar next Thursday on the 17th. It's a free webinar, and he's just absolutely amazing. And if anybody can convince us about the need to plant native, it's him. So please, if you're available, sign up for that webinar on our website.
Okay, well,
Anything else?
yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions. If you want to ask now, I'll give a few seconds. Otherwise, this has been great and so informative.
Wonderful. And we'll come back at any time, and hopefully, I'm sure next time it'll be in person. And and like Peggy mentioned, we just finished creating another presentation, because in this one we try to show people the why native plants are important, and what kind of things we can do to create a healthier ecosystem. And we just kind of leave it as plant native, because we only have so much time. So our second one picks up, and we're just going to go in our second one, we talk a little bit more again about why it's important, but the majority of the presentation is going through specific native plants, not just any native plants that work well in smaller suburban landscapes, and that can smaller suburban traditional landscapes. And so we go through those one by one, and teach you about the plant and why it's good, what it looks like, how big it gets, what kind of condition it likes, and so on. So that is another presentation that, if hint, if Oak Lawn Library would ever like to invite us to give, we're on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be in touch to schedule that one for sure.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for presenting tonight and giving us all this great info. And thank you to everyone for attending and caring about our environment to plant native. So I hope everyone has a great night, and take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
and happy
you.
spring.
Bye.
All right, bye. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.